Okay, so we've got a ton of info here about the Monday blues. And it seems like everyone's got an opinion on why Monday's, well, Monday,
Hmm.
but we're going to go deeper, right? Way beyond just complaining about it. We're going to uncover, like, the how and the why this whole 5-day work week thing even started, and why Monday specifically became the day we love to hate.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting here is that the history behind our work schedules is not what most people would expect.
Exactly. Like, did you know that the 5-day work week, it wasn't designed with like worker well-being in mind
Yeah.
at all. Really, it was all about boosting the economy. To help us unpack this whole thing, I've brought in an expert who's going to connect the dots and, give us some deeper insights into all of this.
Mhm.
So to understand why Mondays feel the way they do, we really have to go back, right? Like way back to the early 1900s.
Oh, yeah.
Paint us a picture. No weekends, people working 6, even 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts. I mean, that was the norm back then. Leisure time, forget it. Practically non-existent for the average worker.
It really puts our modern complaints into perspective, doesn't it? Imagine working 70 plus hours a week with no break in sight. But then in 1926, Henry Ford, you know, Ford Motor Company, he made a seemingly groundbreaking move. He introduced the 5-day work week at his factories.
Okay, so progress. Or is this just a clever way to, like, manipulate consumer behavior?
Well, let's be real. Ford wasn't exactly driven by altruism here. He was a businessman, right? And his goal, like any businessman, was to increase consumer spending.
Okay.
Ford understood that leisure time, this was a new market. It was a new kind of market. It wasn't just selling cars anymore. He was selling the experience of car ownership. Weekends, they became a chance to escape, a chance to consume, and of course, to show off your new Ford.
So, like, literally our modern work schedules, this whole thing, it's built on a foundation of capitalism.
Yeah.
And that intertwining of work and economics, it's still so deeply ingrained in our systems today.
It's definitely something to think about as we, go further into this whole thing about why Monday has become such a, let's call it a focal point for, all the bad vibes. But okay, so why is it Monday specifically? Why Monday? I mean, other cultures start their week on different days, right?
It's a great question, and it seems like such an arbitrary choice, doesn't it? But there's this, like, convergence of factors, and it all kind of led to Monday becoming the day to dread.
All right, lay it on me.
So first you have the influence of Sunday, religious observance. For many, Sunday was a day of rest, a break from the grind. This kind of led to this cultural expectation of, like, a fresh start on Monday.
Okay, I see.
Then you've got the demands of industrial efficiency. Workers were expected to be rested and ready to hit, peak productivity on Monday morning. The machine of industry needed them fresh and energized. So Monday, it's linked with this idea of maximum output, and it's all thanks to the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget capitalism, right? I mean, the 5-day work week had already tied our schedules to economic output. And Monday just became this symbolic start of that whole cycle. It's not just one thing. It's this complex interplay of cultural norms, economic systems, and, historical legacies. But what if this whole system, the 5-day week, Monday is the dreaded beginning, what if it's all just outdated?
Right, like the world has changed drastically since the 1920s, and yet our work structures have remained, well, remarkably similar. I mean, technology has transformed like everything, how we communicate, how we do business, everything. So why are we still stuck in this like rigid 5-day grind?
And that brings us to some really interesting developments that are challenging the status quo, namely the concept of the 4-day work week. And it's not just some trendy idea. This is a potential solution to some of the problems we face in the modern working world.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first heard about this whole 4-day work week thing, it sounded too good to be true.
Oh, I totally get it. We're so conditioned to think of productivity as, directly proportional to the hours we work.
Exactly. But what's so fascinating here is that there's all this evidence coming out that suggests when people have more time to rest and recharge, they're actually more focused and efficient when they are working. It's like work smarter, not harder, right? A 4-day week could encourage that shift. Tell me more about these studies you mentioned.
Well, there was a big one in Iceland, involved over 2,500 workers, and they found that productivity remained the same or even improved in most cases when work hours were reduced.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and there was another study in New Zealand by Perpetual Guardian, and they found that employees reported feeling less stressed, more engaged in their work. They saw like a 20% boost in work-life balance.
20%.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It is. And it's not just about squeezing the same amount of work into fewer days. It's about rethinking how we approach work altogether, prioritizing quality over quantity, focusing on outcomes rather than just, hours logged.
So are there real-world examples of this actually working? Like companies that have made this switch and seen positive results? Give me names.
Oh, absolutely. There are companies of all sizes across various industries experimenting with 4-day work weeks. And the results, they're really encouraging. Microsoft Japan, for example, they tried a 4-day work week a few years back. And get this, they saw a 40% increase in productivity.
40%. That's insane.
Uh,
What were they doing differently?
well, they encouraged shorter meetings, more flexible work arrangements, and a focus on outcomes rather than just being present in the office. And it's not just Microsoft. Companies like Buffer, Kickstarter, even Shake Shack, they've all implemented 4-day workweek trials with some really positive results. They're reporting increased employee satisfaction, reduced burnout, and in a lot of cases, improved productivity.
It sounds like it's not just about like cutting a day, it's about like a whole cultural shift in how work gets done.
Exactly.
I'm sure there are challenges though, right? I mean, transitioning to a whole new work structure, that can't be easy. What are some of the challenges companies are facing?
You're right, there are challenges. Some industries, they might find it harder to adapt than others, especially those with, client-facing roles or 247 operations.
Like hospitals, for example.
Exactly. There's also the potential for increased workload on the remaining 4 days, which could lead to burnout if it's not managed carefully.
And what about the logistics, like scheduling meetings, coordinating projects, making sure you have coverage across departments?
Yeah, all of that. It requires careful planning, clear communication, and a willingness to, adapt and experiment. But the potential benefits, they're significant enough that a lot of companies are willing to put in the effort.
I guess it really comes down to whether we're willing to challenge the status quo and try something new, which honestly is kind of a recurring theme in a lot of our deep dives, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. So often, the things we just accept as, just the way it is, actually have these fascinating histories and hidden assumptions behind them. And once we start to question those assumptions, all sorts of possibilities can open up.
Okay, I'm officially on board with this whole 4-day work week idea. But let's bring it back to Monday for a second. So if we do manage to ditch this whole like outdated 5-day grind, what happens to Monday?
That's a really interesting question. Does Monday just become another day of the week? Does it lose its, symbolic weight as the dreaded start of the work week? Or does it take on like a whole new meaning?
Ooh, maybe it becomes a day of celebration. Like, yay, it's Monday. I've got 4 amazing days ahead of me.
I love that. Or maybe it becomes a day for personal growth and development, a day to pursue passions and hobbies.
Right. Instead of being chained to our desk, we could be taking classes, volunteering, spending time with loved ones. I mean, the possibilities are endless.
They are. And that's what's so exciting about rethinking these, ingrained structures. It's not just about tweaking a schedule. It's about imagining a world where work and life are more harmoniously integrated.
Okay, I'm sold. Let's make this happen.
Yeah.
But realistically, even if we can't all switch to 4-day weeks tomorrow, what can we do, individually to like reframe our relationship with Monday?
That's such a great question and one that's really relevant to our listener. Because even if systemic change is slow, we can still make changes in our own lives to make Mondays a little less daunting.
So less Monday blues and more Monday.
Hmm.
Ugh, I'm struggling here. Something positive.
How about Monday momentum? Start the week with intention, with energy, a focus on what you want to accomplish.
Monday momentum, I love that. It's like taking control of the narrative, setting a positive tone for the week ahead.
Exactly. It's about shifting your perspective and focusing on what you can control. Even small changes can make a big difference.
So like maybe instead of starting the day with a mountain of emails, I dedicate like the first hour to something I actually enjoy, something that, gets me in a good headspace.
That's a fantastic idea. Or maybe you schedule a walk in nature, listen to your favorite music, have a leisurely breakfast, anything that helps you start the day on a positive note.
And maybe, just maybe, we can start to like chip away at this whole Monday is the worst mentality, one Monday at a time. But I think that's a good place to pause and let you, digest all this new information. We've covered a lot of ground already, but don't worry, we're not done yet. We'll be back soon with even more insights into this whole myth of Monday. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about how the 5-day work week and the dread of Monday are like deeply rooted in these historical and economic systems that might be totally outdated for, today's world. And we were just starting to get into this 4-day work week idea. And I got to say, I'm still a little skeptical. It just sounds almost too good to be true.
I get it, it is a big shift in thinking. But what if we considered the possibility that our current 5-day work week isn't actually the most, efficient or productive model?
Okay, I'm listening. You mentioned some studies that showed a 4-day work week can actually boost productivity. I need to hear more about this.
Uh,
What's the, magic formula here?
it's not magic, really. It's about, working smarter, not harder. When you have more time to rest and recharge, you come back to work more focused and more engaged. That's where that increase in productivity comes from. You're less likely to, experience burnout, and your overall well-being improves, which often, translates to higher quality work.
I feel like a lot of companies would be, hesitant to make such a, drastic change.
Yeah.
So what would you say to a company that's, on the fence about trying out a 4-day work week?
I'd say look at the data. The evidence is really mounting that a shorter work week can be beneficial for both employees and employers. Reduced stress, improved morale, increased productivity. Those are tangible benefits that can't be ignored.
True, but it's more than just cutting a day, right? It's a whole cultural shift in, how work gets done.
Exactly. It requires a commitment to, flexibility, trust, and results-oriented work practices.
And that can be a big hurdle for some organizations. What are some of the, specific changes that companies would need to make to actually successfully implement a 4-day work week?
Well, first and foremost, there needs to be a shift in focus from, hours worked to output and outcomes. Companies need to clearly define goals and expectations and, empower their employees to manage their time and workload effectively.
That makes sense, but how do you, ensure that everything actually gets done in 4 days instead of 5?
It often involves things like streamlining processes, eliminating unnecessary meetings, encouraging more, efficient communication. Technology can play a big role here too. Think about collaboration tools, project management software, automation. All of that can help teams work smarter, not harder.
It's fascinating to think about how this could really, revolutionize the workplace. But let's shift gears for a minute, bring it back to, the individual. Even if a 4-day work week isn't, feasible right now, what are some things we can do to just reframe our relationship with Monday to make it less daunting?
That's a great question. Even small changes in our mindset and our habits can have a really big impact on how we experience Mondays. It's about, taking ownership of our experience, even within the constraints of the traditional work week.
So less Monday blues and more Monday. Something positive. I don't know.
How about Monday momentum? Start the week with intention, energy, and a focus on what you want to accomplish.
Monday momentum. I like that. It's like taking control of the narrative, setting a positive tone for the week ahead.
Exactly. It's about shifting your perspective and focusing on what you can control. Even small changes can make a really big difference.
Like maybe instead of starting the day with a mountain of emails, I dedicate the first hour to something that I actually enjoy, something that gets me in a good headspace.
That's a great idea. Or maybe schedule a walk in nature, listen to your favorite podcast, enjoy a leisurely breakfast. Whatever helps you start the day on a more positive note.
That's great advice, but, what are some other, myths about work that we tend to accept without question?
Well, there's the myth of the ideal worker, right?
Yeah.
Always available, always on, always putting work first. This myth, it can lead to burnout, resentment, and ultimately, decreased productivity.
It's like we're, glorifying busyness and sacrificing our well-being in the process.
Exactly. It's a recipe for disaster. We need to challenge these outdated notions and create a work culture that values, balance, sustainability, and well-being.
That's a powerful message, and it seems like we've only, scratched the surface of this topic. What are your, final thoughts on this whole idea of, rethinking work and reimagining Monday?
I think the most important thing to remember is that we have agency. We have the power to shape our work lives, even within the constraints of existing systems. It starts with, questioning assumptions, challenging the status quo, and advocating for change. And it continues with making small but, meaningful changes in our own lives. Remember, Monday doesn't have to be the enemy. It can be an opportunity for a fresh start, a chance to set intentions, and a reminder that we have the power to create a more, fulfilling and balanced work life.
That's a great note to end on. It's time for us to, wrap up this part of our deep dive. But don't worry, we'll be back soon to continue exploring this fascinating topic. In the meantime, we hope this conversation has given you, some food for thought, and maybe even some inspiration to create a more positive and productive Monday experience. It's really amazing how much we've uncovered about, this seemingly simple topic of Mondays.
Yeah, no, right. It really shows you just how deeply embedded these structures are in our lives. We often go through life without even questioning why things are the way they are.
Exactly. We've talked about the history, the economics, the whole 4-day work week thing, and even, how to reframe our mindset. But I want to make sure we're giving our listeners some, like, concrete takeaways. What can they actually do right now to make their Mondays a little less, well, a Monday-ish?
It's all about reclaiming that sense of agency. Even if a 4-day work week or, a complete system overhaul isn't really on the horizon right now, we can still change how we experience Mondays.
Okay, I like that. So where do we start?
Let's start with your Sunday evening routine. Think about it. Are you spending your Sunday evenings dreading the week ahead? Or are you actively setting yourself up for, a more successful Monday?
So instead of like collapsing on the couch and binge watching TV until I pass out, maybe I should spend some time planning my week, organizing my to-do list, maybe even prepping some healthy meals for the week ahead.
Exactly. By taking control of your Sunday evening, you can shift the energy and go into Monday with a sense of purpose instead of that, sense of dread.
I'm already feeling less stressed just thinking about it. What else can we do?
Think about your Monday morning routine. What are the first few things you do when you wake up? Do they set you up for a good day? Or do they just add to the stress?
Okay, I'll admit it. My Monday mornings are usually a chaotic scramble. Like hitting the snooze button a dozen times, rushing to get ready, skipping breakfast. It's not exactly a recipe for a zen start to the week.
Right. So think about how you can shift that. Even just 15 minutes of like mindfulness, a quick workout, or just having a healthy breakfast, it can have a ripple effect on your entire day.
It's like setting the tone for the whole week almost.
Exactly. And remember, these changes don't have to be drastic. Just start small, experiment, and find what works for you. It's all about finding ways to make Monday work for you rather than the other way around.
I think that's really the biggest takeaway I've gotten from this whole deep dive. Like, we're not stuck. We actually have the power to change our relationship with work, with Mondays, and with our own well-being.
And that's a powerful realization. By challenging those assumptions, exploring the alternatives and making conscious choices, we can create a work life that's, more fulfilling, more balanced, and maybe even, dare I say it, enjoyable.
I think you just blew our listeners' minds.
Hopefully in a good way. But remember, the future of work, it's not predetermined. It's something that we are actively creating every single day through our choices and our actions.
Well said. And on that inspiring note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the myth of Monday.
It's been great having this conversation with you.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Everyone, we hope this conversation has sparked some new ideas and maybe challenged some old beliefs. And just maybe even inspire you to take some action. Remember, Monday doesn't have to be the enemy. With a little bit of intention and effort, it can become a day of opportunity, growth, and maybe even, just maybe, a little bit of joy. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those questions coming.